I thought that I need to set the context for what statistics are and what they do. And within administrations, where do they sit, including what we need to do about them, and probably the dangers to the collation of statistics because of the context and where they sit. It is said that Napoleon Bonaparte would give you anything if only you gave him the statistics. And it's not surprising that the French statistics system has features that are very, very strong and embedded in the state. In fact, he was not only believing in the statistics, but he was also very strong on probability. He said that whenever he selected generals, he would look at all generals and he say, well, the credentials are good. But finally, when he had to make the choice, he would ask, is the general, the potential general, lucky? Now, how do you confirm that the person is lucky? Because we have to go through several events to prove that you are lucky. And you must prove that luck by going through several dangerous events. And before he appointed anybody, he said, in the end, the credentials are there, but luck defines it all. Statistics, it's either a Greek word, I think a Latin word, facts about the state. So that's where this comes from, statistics, like economics, facts about the economy, statistics, facts about the state. So its origin is about concerns by the state to know what it is governing, what its strength is, what its economy is. So the term statistics came about. So measurement has always been there. We know that Nightingale is one of the preeminent scientists that came up with measurement. And what did she prove? That people die more in hospital than they die in the field of war. So leave them in the field of war rather than bring them to hospital, because once you bring them to hospital, they die more. She didn't stop there, but she said, why do they die more when they're in hospital? She said the infection is very prevalent when you have everybody in the same area. So antibiotics were discovered. All from collation of statistics, observation, and saying, on the basis of this observation, these are the interventions that have to be made. You can think about anything else, and you will see that the role of statistics in society is the most, I wouldn't like to say the most important, but the most critical in ensuring that the right interventions are made at the right time, and you can track the effects of the interventions that have been made. We have a running battle with journalists, and they say we don't understand journalism, and we say they don't understand statistics. And more generally, we do more or less the same work, but we only do not have the adjectives and the adverbs that describe the phenomena that we are handling as statisticians. If you look at the model of governance, you would say there is some top political leadership, and when I talk about political leadership, I'm talking about entrepreneurs and everybody else who determines what needs to be done on the basis of some kind of a democratic process, election, what have you. But it's a process that all of us accede to. And then on the right hand, what you've got is your academia, and on the left, you've got your journalists. In the middle, the stomach, you've got the plans that are driven by the people who are at the top. And then the right leg is your statistics, the left leg is your resources. A working robot, so to say. When you look at journalists and statisticians, their pledge is to report as fairly as, not as is possible, fairly. So there's no a relative fairness. You must report fairly and truthfully. So I'm talking to people that report fairly. Statistics and the way you collect them follows a particular science. There is a process which is called administrative process, administrative records. There is another process which is survey methodology. And then, of course, there are censuses that we run. Surveys follow a sampling procedure based on a frame that you have. If I have all of you here as journalists, and there would be about whatever number, 25 of you in here, if I count well. And then, of course, if I have a sample of 10%, I'll take every 2.5%. If there is any one of you who is a half, so 10% of that to 25 will be 2.5. So every 2.5% I'll have to take in my sample in order to get my representative sample. And then once I've got that, I'll ask your age, your sex, your income, and so on and so on. And then after that, I look at these numbers, I look at averages, I look at the mean, the median, the mode, and then I look at something called the standard deviation. I say, okay, generally those people that were in there are this age, they earn so much, and I present the results. Having followed the science of collection of information. The other side is when a person gets born, I mean, they record that this person was born, and then when they die, they record that this person died. When the person goes to school, they record that this person has come to school. When the person exits school, they write that this person exited school. That process doesn't follow a survey methodology. It's a process of continuous recording of events. There are benefits of continuous recording of events. And the benefits are that you can collect that information cheaply. But with a survey, you have to go out into households and collect the information. And no sooner have you collected the information, it's outdated. You've got to go and collect again and update so that you can have a time series. But your collection of information in the way I'm suggesting, the Norwegians and the Nordic countries and the Scandinavians have managed this for many years. So they don't have this old-fashioned things called the census, because they just bring the databases, they record everybody every day. When partners part, for whatever reason, they say, I need to know their next address. Don't mind where he comes from, but the one partner who gets kicked out has to provide the next address. Because all this is all part and parcel of the administrative record systems. So they don't run censuses and the like, but they just bring the databases because they have got everybody in there. Here, my son was registered for the first time when he had to go to school. The first day I went to try and register, they asked for the mother's passport, and I didn't have it, and then it took me another 6 years to get to the office, which was just next to my gate, to get him registered. All of us can talk about horror stories around administrative records. So administrative records are not that very, very dependable. But they become very useful registers that you can use in a statistical operation, which is very, very important. I didn't know what to mourn one day. A cousin of mine died, and I went to Cape Town to go and bury him. But when I got there, I got the doctor, and I said, let me see the cause of death. So he gave me this form. I looked at it, and then that was 2002. In 1998, we worked very hard with the Department of Health and Home Affairs, creating this form. Particularly the filling of the form for all information that we needed. So I asked, why haven't you filled here? He said, no, it's for statistics, it's not important. Now I said, by the way, I was already statistician general. But I said, maybe to mourn two things at the same time will kill me. Let me mourn the death of my cousin, and let me not mourn the death of statistics. So I left it at that. So what I've tried to capture is how this information is collected and collated. It gets very, very complex when you have huge databases and so on. But I think the point I want to raise is about the role of statistics in systems of governance and in systems of accountability. Because to me, that's the essence of statistics. What role do they play in systems of accountability? There are 4 systems of accountability that I can think of. Not that all other systems are not systems of accountability, but those that come prominently to the fore are 4. The first one, which is a long one, is really your legislature, your judiciary. All countries have judges, the Chief Justice, and the people who execute justice to others. That's the most common, and they exist whether there is democracy or there is autocracy or no democracy. Those systems have always been there. In South Africa, we have had many judges. In apartheid era, whether there was democracy or not, the judges were there. Judiciary is very, very important as a system of accountability. The second, and these two, in the African context, I don't know how they come about, but they are there. It's and I don't know which one comes first, or which one gained prominence before the other. I think there are systems of legislature, your parliament. That's your system of accountability, parliament. Then, once the system of parliament gains traction, you've got the system of supreme audits. And of course, there's the poor cousin. No, I don't know whether this thing is a system of accountability, but there's that thing there. Whenever we have problems, we actually fight over in the media. You will know that ourselves and ADCOP argue around how many people are unemployed in South Africa and so on, and the loan sharp will come his figures, and I say, but show your methods, and then he doesn't give me his methods. But he says, no, the unemployment in South Africa is very low, and I say it's very high. And then we ask ourselves, what is the self-interest, and all these other questions come about. It is this 4th system of accountability, which is a very, very poor cousin and a latecomer in systems of accountability that I think I have to talk about. And in the case of South Africa, you know the judiciary has been there all the time. Legislature, well, you only have legislature with representative legislature. And then the audits are a new phenomenon. Auditor General Nombembe, when he coughs these days, we sit up. Before the Auditor General will talk until they are blue in the face and say he doesn't know what he's talking about. But the combination of the legislature and the Auditor General makes for governments to function. And then, of course, statistics as a system of accountability and governance, it's an important system. Let me tell you why it is important. Where this system is violated, things go terribly wrong. In Argentina, for the last 2, 3 years, 4 years now, the consumer price index had been produced. In the last 2 years, the government decided that it was going to intervene on this consumer price index because it's too high. These statisticians tell us that the consumer price index is so much. They don't like it. The government doesn't like it. The minister went in there literally to evict the person who was responsible for consumer price index. And this woman has been persecuted. Argentina wants a single-digit consumer price index, and it's double-digit. Anyone who produces a figure gets persecuted by the government, and they are subjected to paying $100,000. Now, the South Americans who trade with Argentina and the people in the street are denied their entitlement to good statistics for making good decisions. Let me tell you what the implication of this is, and the implication is not very far. It happened here in South Africa, with me as the statistician general already. What happened? In 2003, those of you who can still remember, and I haven't forgotten, and I get reminded, or I remind myself all the time, we messed up the consumer price index. We provided figures in 2003 of an inflated consumer price index, at least for up to 15 months. And in that time, the consumer price index was inflated artificially, meaning that those who invest money, pensioners and everybody got good returns. Those who pay interest paid more interest than they deserve to pay. The government, in its linked bonds, suffered because you buy into the future and therefore on the basis of high interest. And when that interest drops, you lose. The losses to government, about 300 billion rands. So if you have to understand the context of Argentina, where government interferes and says these are the figures, losses to private sector about 10 billion. Of course, those who gained and those who gained were silent, they were quiet. Those who lost had lost. But this is the essence of this thing. I was already at the helm of the organization. Something that I don't forget. And when I talked to my Argentinian friends and said, surely this era of commission cannot take you far. They walked out of the room when I was presenting at the UN Statistics Commission about their behavior, that it's not acceptable. Where I also presented a case of South Africa that indeed we did this thing. Now, government has interfered in the production of statistics in Argentina. We have written to their parliament, we have done everything that we can do as statisticians, and we are going to appeal to the UN human rights to say that Argentinians are undermined in terms of their access, their entitlement to access of information on which they can make appropriate decisions, therefore undermining the whole system of democracy. Now, Greece. The case of Greece is a very interesting one. Greece had been threatening at one stage last December to lock up the head of statistics there because they said he's unpatriotic. We have been arguing with the Greek government that, no, you can't lock that man up. He's doing a good job. Greece wants its debt ratio to GDP to be low. The statistical information shows that it is high. And the stakes are high. People have lost jobs in Greece. People have committed suicide. It's terrible. And the battle now is around the statistics, what number to believe. And this man, if he's found guilty that he has given the wrong numbers, he'll be locked in jail for 5 years, the Greek statistician. Now, he stood behind him and said, you are doing a good job. The debt ratio to GDP is high. It's in the double digits, 13 instead of 14, instead of what the Greek wants. So this statistical information is so critical. Canada. Canada is a very wonderful country, good statistical systems. But in their census of 2010, they've done something that is un-Canadish, if there is something like that. I've spoken to you about administrative records and the census and so on. In the questionnaire, we say to you, you answer all questions. In Canada, they've been doing the same thing. They have something called the short form and the long form. And they said, oh, no, you should answer the long form voluntarily. Now, if the long form is a sample, but we have to answer the questions voluntarily, then there's a problem there. Because once you have drawn your sample, everyone in the sample must answer. When you include a voluntary process, then we are going to bias the results. Statisticians know how to deal with bacteria, but they don't know how to deal with virus. And bias is part of the virus. You can't control it, but bacteria you can control. Now, I talked to my counterpart at the same seminar around threats to fundamental principles of official statistics. In the same seminar where I was talking about Argentina, South Africa, and Greece. My counterpart said, no, you don't know, our law is different. I said, yes, the law might be different. but the statistical laws are the same. The sampling laws are the same. What we have done is not correct. So this is dominating the environment of statistics, where we function. The point I'm making, and this decision was made by government, by the minister. He said, no, no, no. Now, the Americans, more recently, a person by the name of Professor Leslie Kish, distinguished intellectual at Michigan, Ann Arbor, designed what is called the community survey, the American community survey, based on a sample process, et cetera, et cetera. Congress, a few weeks ago, said, this community survey is not even a sample survey. Now, they are refusing to fund it. Now, the issue is don't put pepper in our eyes, don't cut our ears, because statistics are the ears and eyes of administration, of state. Now, Congress is saying, no, 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 they'll cut their eyes and put pepper in their eyes. Cut their ears and put pepper in their eyes. In the case of South Africa, the law is very clear. The minister cannot interfere in the operations of the statistician general. I determine the methods. I determine when I'll issue the results. I have authority over that. Of course, that comes with a lot of responsibility. And when you mess up the CPI with all that authority you have, then you find that this is a task that is too heavy. And of course, the question is, why didn't they fire me in 2003? I wasn't fired, but it was a very difficult time. I think there were other reasons why it was difficult for government to take any decision that would have been drastic. The one was we were ignorant and learning. Second was we were collectively ignorant and learning, because government couldn't sponsor us for 6 million, a survey of 6 million rands. And out of that survey, we would be able to estimate what the component of weights for housing is for rentals. Because that survey was not run, we couldn't get information on rentals. So we continued to impute on a false base. And with time, passage of time, this thing started yawning like that. And Stopforth came up of Investec and said, these statisticians don't know what they are doing. They have messed it up on the rental, housing rental. So that survey, which was the instrument for doing this, was not funded. But instead of ourselves saying, the housing component is going to be a problem, we are not able to say so. But even in the statistics office, there were people who were saying, if they do that, they don't fund you, that housing thing is going to be a problem. But you know, arrogance also is something that plays itself. And we are not arrogant, we are very arrogant, and we didn't listen to the voices of reason that were coming up in the organization. I didn't listen. And that was the cost of this whole thing. So the statistical law in South Africa is very modern. And it also provides for me to say what the discussions were between myself and the minister and make those public. In Canada, the discussion, it cannot be made public between the head of statistics and the minister. And the public of Canada still do not know what was the last discussion before Munir, the head of Statistics Canada, resigned on the basis of a change of how they would conduct their census in 2000. By the way, for us as statisticians, our asset is time series. Everything else is time series. You must plot change over time. Once that time series is broken, our assets are gone. Our investments are gone. Time series, it's everything and everything. Probably you want to know about what products we produce in Stats SA. I have provided the context. I don't know how much more time I have, but there are quite a number of products that we have. The Consumer Price Index, probably you only knew that we produced it when we messed it up in 2003. All the time people thought that it is produced by the Reserve Bank. No, it's produced by Stats SA, surely. Yes, it was only when he messed it up and they said, oh, it's not Reserve Bank. No, yes. Obviously, it should be those ones. Let's say. Producer Price Index, it's one. Consumer Price Index, Gross Domestic Product. Once we produce this, Consumer Price Index and PPI, Governor of the Reserve Bank will come and set the rates, the repo rate. And once we have produced figures on manufacturing, how the manufacturing is changing, short-term serial manufacturing, retail sales, car sales, and so on. And of course, the big one, the census, causes of death, all those are the things that a statistical organization produces. These facts about the state are highly political and very difficult to manage, particularly in an environment such as ours in South Africa, where the allocation of resources are based on the numbers. So provinces don't want to be rich. They want to remain poor. When you release poverty indices, it means the richer provinces will not get the subsidies that government may provide. And those who do not get that will feel very much marginalized. So provinces say, no, I'm also poor. I want that subsidy. The municipalities say, no, we are poor, we want that subsidy. So these figures play themselves in the political arena of resource allocation. They are the arbiter of resources. So instead of looking at the facts, people tend to think about the consequences. Premier Merkel in 1996, after we released the results, we also messed up in 1996. We released a preliminary result on the census. This preliminary result came to haunt us because only the Western Cape was the one that remained not only the same, but their figures also got a little lower. All other provinces got adjusted upwards. And Premier Merkel said, it can't be so that only the Western Cape is the province that doesn't get their numbers upped. What is common across all these provinces? All of them are, it looks like the ANC and IFP, only what was Premier Merkel now? The National Party province is not getting what is. He said, now we have been deprived 1.6 billion. The matter was becoming a little bit political. That are the statisticians instead of say politically aligned? Why is it happening with the Western Cape? We are now being deprived 1.6 billion. We almost went to the Constitutional Court on this matter. It was this close. Since then, we said no preliminary results. We'll release the final results that will have been tested and presented because we can see how difficult these facts about the state can be when they play themselves out in the political arena. In fact, this was captured very nicely by Minister Manuel. I happen to have reported to him now, it's almost 12 years, as the head of statistics and reporting to the same minister. And waiting for Stats SA for 17 years, well under the same minister. When we came and said, there was this scientific method of adjustments for undercount, he almost fell off his chair. He said, you guys, have you understood what you have done? He was reaching for his phone, wanting to call Madiba and tell him that he's resigning on the basis of this 1996 census. It was that serious. I mean, we walked in there at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the usual meeting. And that meeting was almost ending up with the minister resigning. This is how serious these things can be. Why? Because he was quite aware of the consequences of how we have assembled the figures and how we are going to communicate them. And indeed, in the case of Western Cape, it was that close to get into the Constitutional Court. So these numbers play themselves in a political arena, and as they do, can be quite dangerous and serious. Now, Census 2011. Well, we have seen us running the census. I'm sure you have all been counted, but I know there are some people who have not been counted in this room. I'm not going to say what the undercount will be. We are still working on the figures, and we don't know what the undercount is going to be, with which we'll adjust the figures. But the figures are coming out in October. Now that I'm addressing you, what do we need to do? The census is a very expensive endeavor, 3.4 billion rands spent on this thing. The levels of literacy in South Africa, very bad. Numeracy, very bad. We produce numbers. How are we going to communicate these numbers to the public? We know that these numbers play a role in municipalities, play a role in municipal infrastructure, play a role in all these areas, in education and everything. Almost every other decision has to be based on the numbers. If you count, count it, you can't manage it. You really need. It can't be managed unless you can measure it. If you cannot measure it, you can't manage it. Now, how do we communicate these figures? How do we make them useful to the public? And how do they use everybody else use these figures for their own decision making? And I think the media has a very big role to play. As I said, that there is the academia, the media, and the statistics in this working robot. You have a very big role to play to communicate the information. As you have played a role in communicating when the consumer price index is there, when the producer price index is there. But there are some observations to make that the game of numbers is not, at times is not a very good friend of journalists, because the numbers are not easily understood. And we need to work together to try and see how we understand the numbers and communicate them, because they can be quite complex and complex to communicate. And statisticians are not the best people, they are not the best communicators either. And we will say that we've measured the sample size was 3,000 at a 95% confidence interval, and what we got as far as this is concerned, the mean is 2,500 and give plus or minus 5%. Now, what have we said? Nothing. But that's how the statistician communicates. That the mean income is 2,500 plus or minus 5%, because the sample design was such that the level of confidence was the 95% confidence interval. But journalists have a way of communicating that and saying, in the country, amongst the population that is working, the income that an average household, or like this one, and they will put a picture of that average household, the income is 2,500. But it has some margin of about 5% this way or that way, and that 5% would be 2.5 times 5, it's 12, and then it's 12 rand this way, 12 rand the other way. Statisticians don't communicate that well. So what have I said? I think I've said to you that collection of statistics and compilation and dissemination of it is a national duty, a very important national duty. It is part and parcel of the 4 constituents of systems of accountability of modern states. There are difficulties in the compilation, and one of those things is political interference. And where there is political interference, citizens are necessarily and usually deprived of their entitlement to their right to information. And I've given a few examples. I've also made a few examples of where a statistics office itself commits such errors and how it corrects those errors. I've not gone at length on that, But I'm sure when we release the CPI, nobody worries about it. They say that's the number. Because as a consequence of those mistakes, we improved the way we do business in the organization. And the numbers that we release are the verifiable numbers, except with my colleague and friend Lone Sharp, who at times say that unemployment should be lower than 1 digit, lower than a digit, lower than 2 digits in the 8%. And we say unemployment is 25%. And he says, we say so because we have self-interest. I say, what? What self-interest? If we had self-interest with government, we would prefer your number rather than the higher number. But thank you very much.
Can we go to questions?